Greetings, everyone. My name is Jeremy Shelton from the Freshwater Research Center, and I'm going to be speaking to you about a conservation project called Saving Sandfish. Freshwater ecosystems are in serious trouble the world over, and freshwater biodiversity is declining twice as fast as that in marine and terrestrial ecosystems. Freshwater fishes, in particular, are heading rapidly towards extinction in many parts of the world, and migratory freshwater fishes are especially threatened. The situation in South Africa is no different, and our most recent national biodiversity assessment has revealed freshwater fishes to be the most threatened species group in the country. And there's really a cocktail of threats responsible for this dire state of freshwater life, but it's impacts of invasive species that are the biggest threat to our indigenous freshwater fish. There's been a recent boost in freshwater fish publicity locally and also globally, and also a strong recognition of the need for serious and decisive on-the-ground conservation action. But capacity is limited in South Africa and elsewhere, and surprisingly, very little on-the-ground work is actually happening to save these imperiled species. So there's a real need for NGOs to step into this space, and that's where the Saving Sandfish project was born. When looking where to focus our limited resources and capacity, the Clan William sandfish really stands out as a top priority. It is South Africa's most threatened migratory freshwater fish. It's a peculiar species with this unusual downturned mouth, very strong fins, but a species we actually know relatively little about. We do know that it was once widespread in the Olifants and Durban river systems in the southwest of the country. And if we flip that horizontally, we can see that over the last 50 years, there's been a really big decline where the species has disappeared completely from the Olifant system and is now known from just a few areas in the Durban system. Our most recent survey of the Durban revealed just 45 fish caught over a 10-day survey of 100 kilometers of river. A decline that's really coincided with the introduction and spread of invasive predatory fish like bass. But there's a glimmer of hope. On the way back from that survey, some of the researchers noticed tiny fish in one of the tributaries, the Bido River, fish on closer inspection that turned out to be sandfish. But more on that just now. During the harsh, dry summer months, sandfish inhabit permanent pools in the Durban River, a harsh environment where temperatures soar and water turbidity can be very high indeed. But then following the winter rains during springtime, when the flowers are out, many of these seasonal tributaries that flow into the Durban become inundated with water. Tributaries that stand dry for much of the year suddenly flow. And it's these flows that trigger the movement of sandfish into tributaries like the Durban, like the Bido River, to spawn. A migration that in 2020 comprised just 78 fish. And this year, 156 sandfish were seen moving up into the Bido River. An incredible sight to see in this shallow and clear water. These fish that have these incredibly intricate nasal structures, allowing them to smell differences in the water from different rivers and return home, we think, to the river where they were born, just like salmon do. There's a science dimension to the project where we have a PhD student, Cecilia, who's measuring this migration, surveying 30 pools throughout the 15-kilometer range over which this migration occurs. She's collecting detailed data on temperature and flow, trying to deepen our understanding of what it is that sandfish need in terms of flows and temperature to successfully spawn. And on a finer scale, to measure the actual specific parts of the river where different key life history stages and behaviors take place. After the sandfish arrive in the Bido, they seem exhausted after their journey, and they spend the first 5 days just hanging out in a selection of pools, milling around during the daytime. But then one night they head up into shallow water, moving upstream into riffles above the pool or just downstream of the pool. And all of a sudden, their lethargic behavior becomes suddenly explosive. A frenzy of fins and water droplets culminating in the moment of fertilization, where the male sandfish release their milt over the eggs carried up that river by the females. After the spawning takes place, the sandfish, now quite scrawny after the spawning and releasing their eggs, return back to the During, locally called at this stage plunk rimpies, leaving behind tens of thousands of fertilized sandfish eggs. Eggs that after a week or two hatch into larvae, and by early summer, the Bido is full with these beautiful, glistening, juvenile sandfish everywhere, and things are looking great, right up until the point where they're not. Bluegill sunfish are another alien species, brought here as a fodder fish for bass, but a predator in its own right. And bluegill sunfish have become experts at eating sandfish in the Bido. A 20-centimeter bluegill is more than capable of consuming lots of 5-centimeter sandfish. And it's really this, in combination with reduced water levels from alien species of plants that are abstracting water, and also over abstraction of water for farming, it's leaving the sandfish in this very difficult situation, surrounded by alien fish and running out of water, resulting in a recruitment failure in these last tributaries where they still spawn. The sandfish life cycle is essentially broken, with larvae and juveniles unable to recruit to adulthood. And we're left with this population of aging adult sandfish in the During River, a recipe for distinction. And that's really where the Saving Sandfish Project is experimenting with this innovative idea of working with landowners to remove alien fish from farm dams like this one, to create sanctuaries for sandfish, to recreate these permanent pools without alien fish that have been lost from tributaries like the Bido, a critical habitat in the life cycle of the sandfish. Rescuing young fish from the river, moving them to these dams, and then releasing them back into the wild is our plan. We're creating these sanctuaries either by draining dams to get rid of alien fish, or by using the pesticide rotenone to remove alien fish like bluegill. In one dam, over 10,000 bluegill, and yes, each of those little silver spots is a bluegill, were removed from one particular dam. And this is all happening with landowner support, landowner buy. Last year, we were successful in creating 3 sandfish sanctuaries cleared of alien fish and ready for young sandfish. In November, we've begun the Sandfish Rescue, which involves identifying areas where the young fish were congregating, where they still remained, collecting them from the river, transporting them in buckets, in vehicles, up to these dams. And I'm really, really proud of the Saving Sandfish team, who were able to rescue over 7,000 young sandfish from the Bido River that all would have died, which, as far as we know, is South Africa's biggest freshwater fish rescue to date. These fish were then released into the sanctuary dams, and they seem to have grown really, really well. Fast forward to 1 year later, we returned to these dams to collect the sandfish, which had now grown from about 5 centimeters to about 20 centimeters, a size which now enables the sandfish to be bass-proof. We captured them from the dams, took them back down to the river at the exact same time when the next year's spawning migration was happening, tagged a large proportion of these fish with these tiny pit tags, just like the tags you'd put into your cat or dog to track it in case it gets lost, and released over 1,000 of these fish back into the wild to complete this broken life cycle. The next steps in the project are to monitor these tagged fish to see whether what we're doing is actually boosting numbers of sandfish in the wild. Is it a useful thing for this threatened species? We're working with new landowners to create more sandfish sanctuaries so that we're able to do an even bigger sandfish rescue this year. And we're also about to embark on an updated sandfish population assessment, the first full assessment that's been done in 10 years, so we can get a better idea of the status of the species and update its red list status as well. And importantly, alongside all of this, we'll be doing good science along the way through collaborating with universities and students. To find out more about the project, I encourage you to follow Freshwater Films or Freshwater Research Center at Freshwater SA, where we'll be releasing different forms of visual media to communicate this conservation project as the story unfolds. And as a part of this conference, I'm really excited that we'll be having a screening of a 12-minute segment of the latest episode of the Saving Sandfish web series, episode 4, The Quest for Spawning. I'm so excited about this episode, and I really hope you enjoy it. Just to end off, I'd like to send out a huge thank you and shout out for all of the organizations that we're partnering with, and also the organizations that are supporting us to make this conservation work happen. And lastly, thanks very much to AZEF for having us here to speak at this awesome conference, as well as to showcase the Saving Sandfish web series.